Hi everyone, welcome to today's share class. Super excited to have you guys all join in today. Happy Monday. We are thrilled to be here today sharing this particular recipe for a strawberry cream Swiss cake roll with you guys. It's such a fun story to tell you why I'm even making this for you. It's because at one of our earlier share classes in the year, we had someone who was struggling with the recipe. Time and time again, she mentioned that the recipe was not working out for her. And like a lot of people, she sent the recipe over to me. I took a look at it and I made just a couple of tweaks, reshared it with her, and it worked for her and it worked for our family. And our family actually fell in love with this recipe. And it has become a true family favorite. It's been the biggest requested dessert so far this past summer. And I thought it would be the perfect time to share it with all of y'all because I've made a few additional tweaks to it. But I just have to give a huge shout out to Jennifer. The whole basis of these share classes is for sharing. When we share in our lives, it just makes it that much more special when you know that a recipe is fantastic and you go and share it with others and then they go and share it with their family, and it's a ripple effect, and it's truly the whole point behind these share classes. And so we hope you guys try this recipe and fall in love with it as much as we do. Okay, so in order to get started, it's not a complicated recipe at all. There are several steps to this recipe. We're gonna use cake flour, a small amount of sugar, baking soda, cream of tartar, salt, eggs, about 4 eggs, and canola oil, vanilla extract, whole milk, and also some strawberries, and some cornstarch and some powdered sugar. So not a ton of ingredients. So just make sure that you have all that on hand before you get started in preparing this recipe, and we'll be sure and put that up here on the video so you have that. And you know what's fun is I want to show you this recipe as it was presented to me. And so this particular recipe involved the use of a scale and also measuring cups as well. But I thought it would be fun to show you this recipe because it's a combination of regular measuring cups and using a digital scale. Now, it's becoming increasingly more popular to use a digital scale in cooking, and the real reason is because that way you get precision on every time you use the recipe. You don't have to worry about how densely you pack a flour into your cup. You just weigh it and it comes out exactly the same every time. And so if you haven't invested in a scale yet, they're really inexpensive. I highly recommend it. It's a fun way to make something that you want to come out perfect every single time. I'm still old school. I use measuring cups all of the time. You don't have to go to a scale. But for this recipe, I wanted to show you how it was sent to me. The way that this recipe was presented to me, it was a Japanese cake roll. And I just removed the term Japanese, replaced it with the word Swiss because most of us recognize a Swiss cake roll and what that looks like. So that's the only change I made to the title, but I did want to stay true to a lot of the techniques of the original recipe that Jennifer shared with me. Okay, so to get started with this recipe, you're going to need a large rectangular pan. The original recipe, I want to say, called for an 8 by 15. I didn't have that. And what I had on hand was 11 by 15, which is 2 inches deep. And so that's what I'm using today for this recipe. Feel free to play with using a different size pan. Just know it could be thicker or thinner depending on what you use. But the most important step that you'll need to do is line your cake pan with parchment paper. And really the easiest way to do this is to take a regular sheet of parchment paper. You guys know I love the sheets of parchment paper and the standard sheets. That way you're not always trying to rip it off and get the right exact size. But for this, it's a little bit bigger than our pan. So I just take my thumb and run it, oops, set it down to do this so it's even. I just use my thumb and press it against the side. And that helps form our cutting line. And I do that on the end as well. And you'll see that it just makes some indentations. So grab some scissors and we'll just cut the parchment paper right to size. And let's do the other side. And this part is super important. I wouldn't recommend using spray, non-stick spray, or any other technique, just because you want this to come out truly to perfection when you go to get ready to roll it and work with it. And so just bear that in mind as you cut this out. So now that cake pan is prepared, we've lined it, and we're gonna set our pan off to the side. And then what I want you to do is just head to your oven, go ahead and preheat it to 325 degrees. And then another tip is we're gonna be making whipped cream later on. So if you have an extra bowl, go ahead and take that bowl, beater paddles, whatever kind you have, if you're using a mixer grate or if you're using a handheld mixer, take those, put these in the freezer. And it'll take about 15 minutes or so to put this recipe together, but this will help our whipped cream to whip up quicker. So I'm gonna go ahead and place this in the refrigerator. So now that our bowl is in the freezer, we're ready to get started on the cake. We have our oven preheating, so that's ready to go. Our cake pan is lined. So now what I want you to do is go ahead and get your scale out, ready to go. We're gonna get another bowl out and grab your sifter. I'm using an old-fashioned one that I love. So I have that. We're gonna need sugar. We're gonna need cake flour. And we're going to need baking soda, which I already have pre-measured, some salt, and that's what's going to get us started here. So when you're working with a digital scale, you just want to go ahead and turn it on and then use a small bowl and place it on top, and we're going to tar it. So you click it again typically, and it takes out the weight of the bowl, so it's not measuring that aspect of it. And the other tip is to, when you're putting things into this, grab a spoon. Instead of shaking it in, it's a little bit easier to control to get the exact measurement that you want. So we're gonna start off with some cake flour, and I'm gonna use the spoon, and we're gonna need 45 grams of cake flour. And working in grams, once you get used to it, it's super easy and simple, and this goes super quickly, and you know that you're going to have the exact amount that you need every single time. And you know, you guys, if you don't have cake flour on hand, there's simple recipes you can find online. It's a combination of flour and cornstarch is all it is, and it just makes it a little bit lighter. I would not use regular flour for this. The cake flour is important because it makes it a light and airy cake. So we need exactly 45 grams of cake flour. So we're gonna take our bowl here with our sifter in it and just add that to the top. Go and set that off to the side. And then now we're gonna need, this is the great thing, is this recipe barely uses sugar. and we're gonna be using 25 grams of sugar. There we go, and if you get a little bit extra, you just take it out with your spoon, and you need exactly 25 grams of granulated sugar. So we'll add that to the top. Great. Set that off to the side. And then you're going to need 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. And then you're going to need 1/2 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar. Just add that to the top. And then 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. So that is a super simple set of ingredients there, and we're just going to sift it all together. And like I told you guys, I'm using this old-fashioned. I've had this for a super long time. It's been in my family for years, and so it's fun to use. You can certainly use a more modern one. Sifts together really quickly. This way you don't have any lumps in your batter. So this stuff is pretty important for this particular recipe. And wait till you see truly how light and airy this cake is. It's absolutely amazing. So now we have our dry ingredients sifted. So now I'm going to take the spoon and just create a well right in the center. So just a little divot down in there. And we're gonna add our wet ingredients into that well area, that indented area. And you can stir it around a little bit first, just to make sure everything's mixed together. And then create that well in the center. Okay, and so now what we're gonna need are 3 eggs. You'll need 3 eggs. Go ahead and grab some canola oil. I have mine out already. And then you'll need vanilla as well as some milk. All right, and grab a tablespoon measure or 2. And then, typically you guys, that I like to, when I'm dealing with eggs, we're gonna have to separate these eggs out. So go ahead and grab a couple of bowls to make your life easier when we go to crack these. So I'm gonna set this bowl off to the side so you guys can see. And I'll just use a small one here, and then I have a larger one to hold everything. So we need 3 egg yolks, and then we're going to need some egg whites later on, so make sure you save those. So I'm gonna go ahead and crack this over the small bowl. And I always turn it upright, and you get your 2 little halves there, and you just rotate them back and forth to separate them out. Excellent. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that egg yolk to the batter, and here is my bowl for my egg whites. Sink, and we'll just repeat that. So crack it, turn it upright, as we talk about in a lot of these share classes. And just let that egg white fall down, and then use the cups to go back and forth. And there's some people who use their hands to do this. You can certainly do that if you want. And there's our second egg yolk. Just add that there. Here is our third egg yolk. Now, just as a trick, so you guys know, you're gonna need a total of 4 eggs, but for the batter, you only need 3 yolks. Okay, so later on for our meringue, we're gonna need 4 egg whites. And so go ahead and separate out that 4th one. And we will not need a 4th egg yolk, so I'll toss it in there. We'll put our 4th egg white over here. We're gonna set this bowl off to the side. And one important thing is this recipe is gonna require us to make some meringue. It's important to use room temperature eggs. They'll just whip up so much easier. And also when you're cracking and separating eggs, super important to just rinse your hands. So that's what I'm gonna go do. Wash them up so I don't contaminate anything else that I touch. And then I like to wipe down my counter too, just in case I spilled anything. All right, there we go. All right, so we have our 3 egg yolks put in here. We're not gonna stir just yet. We're gonna grab a tablespoon, and we're gonna need 3 tablespoons of canola oil. We're gonna add that in here. 1, here's 2, and here's our 3rd tablespoon. There we go. So 3 tablespoons of canola oil, and we're gonna need 3 tablespoons of whole milk. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we'll set that off to the side. And you know what's great about this recipe, there's so many recipes that require vanilla extract. Well, this particular recipe requires literally just a hint. So we're only using 1/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla extract. So just a super tiny amount. Do not need much at all, but it's just enough to flavor it really nicely. So I'm gonna grab a whisk and just stir this up. You don't want to over stir, you're just stirring until those eggs are thoroughly combined with the flour mixture. You guys can see it's a super pretty yellow. I didn't even plan on matching with this, but it matches my shirt today. Just stir that up, and you'll see because we sifted it, there's not lumps in it or anything, and it just comes together super easily. Okay, so that is done. So we're gonna actually set this off to the side. We don't need this. I'm gonna grab my scale again. We are going to have to measure out additional sugar. So I'm gonna turn this back on, and we're gonna be starting with our meringue. And we're gonna need an additional amount of sugar, which is about 50, we're gonna need exactly, 50 grams of sugar. So grab your spoon and make sure you tar your bowl that you put on top of your scale. There we go. And we're gonna add in 50 grams. And just so for a reference, you guys, 50 grams is about 1/4 of a cup. And we have exactly 50 grams there. It's so fun to actually work with the digital scale, so I hope you guys will try it. So set that little bowl off to the side. We don't quite need it yet. We're going to place our digital scale off to the side. We will grab our egg whites they're at room temperature. And then we're gonna need a little bit more cream of tartar for this. So you're gonna need 1/4 of a teaspoon, so make sure you have that handy. And then get your mixer ready. I'm gonna put my my beater attachment in here. So that's ready to go. And we are going to pour our egg whites into the bowl. And a trick that I want to mention to you guys, it's really important that this bowl is super clean. You don't want to put your fingers down in here because the oils from your fingers can transfer inside the bowl, and your meringue won't whip up quite as high if it's not a super clean and dry bowl. So make sure your bowl is super clean. We will go ahead and put in our cream of tartar. Oops, there we go. 1/4 of a teaspoon. Let's put that right in the bottom. Set this off to the side. Okay, So pardon the sound that this is gonna make. We're gonna start it off on low, and as it starts to get frothy, we'll increase our speed. And all frothy means is you're gonna see lots of bubbles being created. And I love watching meringue being made because it starts off, it gets frothy, and you'll see it start to change color. So it'll be a really pale color, and as air is coming into it, it's going to turn white. So once you see it turn white, that's when you're going to want to go ahead and begin to add the sugar. And typically the best way to do that is maybe a tablespoon at a time. So it's starting to be super bubbly, it's turning white, it's starting to increase in size. And you can turn it all the way up to high. If you're using a handheld mixer, it works the exact same way. And as soon as you see it turn that pure white color, go ahead and begin to add the sugar. And just about a tablespoon at a time. To whip up, and then you're going to whip it until it gets to a stiff peak stage, and I'll just show you what that is. It's easier than saying it. If you pull your beater attachment down and then you lift it up and turn it upright, your peaks will stand upright. That's all stiff peak means. If it bends over, that peak right there, if it folds over, that's a soft peak. So we have it at our exact consistency that we're looking for. You guys can see the inside of the bowl. It quadrupled in size. And I love making meringue. It's so pretty and it's just fun to do. And kids love watching this being made. It just looks like a big puffy cloud. It's so fun. So what I want you guys to do is grab a spatula and go ahead and get your bowl with the batter in it. And we're going to be taking this meringue and folding it into the batter. And a lot of people, this is where, there's a chance that the recipe can go awry. And when I say a folding technique to put the meringue into the batter, that piece is really important. You're not going to want to stir, and the reason we don't stir is it will deflate the meringue. And so you're going to take about 1/3 of this and just put it into your batter. And the folding method, all it is you go down in the center, pull to the side, and fold over. So if you guys can see that, you go down in the center, pull to the edge of the bowl, and turn your spatula and go back to the center. And that's all you're gonna do. And this folding technique, you use this in making angel food cakes to keep the angel food cake super light and airy. And it's the same principle for this cake roll. So we don't want to stir it because then our meringue will deflate and we will not get the same result that we're looking for. And you just keep stirring until it's all incorporated. And then you just go back and add in some more. And the rest of it, there you go. And I typically try to scrape every little bit out of here. Because sometimes, especially this is a great thing to teach kids. A lot of kids typically won't want to scrape out every last bit, and they'll wonder why a recipe maybe doesn't come out. And that can be one of the reasons, is because all the batter wasn't placed into it. So we've added our last bit of meringue, and we'll do the exact same thing. Go down in the center and then pull it to the edge and fold it over. So I hope you guys can see that, and just drag it to the edge and then turn your spatula, go back to the center. You're just basically making big O's. If you think of it that way, make a big O. Go down the center, pull to the edge, and just keep doing that until you'll see it turns a beautiful yellow color. Such a pretty batter, and you can see that the air of the batter and the meringue is still in there. And I can see just a few white streaks, and once all the white streaks are gone, you know that it's fully incorporated. There we go, and I just see a couple more, so a few more spins, and I just spin it on the edge here. There we go, and there is our batter. Okay, set this off to the side. I want you guys to grab that pan that we pre-prepared. There we go. Just make sure it's in there just so. All right. So now you guys can, I like to pour it in a ribbon just to make it easier in getting an even consistency of batter everywhere. So you guys can do that. And again, be sure and scrape every last ounce of the batter out of here. And once you get the hang of this recipe, it really takes no time at all. It's a really simple recipe. In general, if you're not used to working with meringue, that can be maybe the hardest part for folks. But other than that, you'll see that this is a really simple recipe. And again, scrape every little bit out of there, and then you can use your spatula and just gently, you don't want to push down with the top of your batter, or your top of your spatula, excuse me. That will deflate it. So you're just gently spreading it. Just try not to push down. You can turn your pan around and make sure you get your corners. Push everything up to the edge. There we go. And then you can smooth it across the top. And again, just try not to push down. Just be really super gentle with it. There we go. Put that last little bit back in there. And then what I want you guys to do is grab either side of your cake pan and then just tap it a couple of times on your counter, and you'll see that bubbles will pop. And this just helps get out any air pockets that the cake batter may have in there. And then I want you to place it into your oven for 14 minutes. We're gonna look for a light golden brown cake. So let's go do that. Okay guys, so we just put our cake into the oven for 14 minutes. And meanwhile, what I want you guys to do is grab a cooling rack. Make sure you have oven mitts. We're gonna be flipping the cake out, and the steps that happen once the cake comes out happen fairly quickly. So it's just super important that you're ready to go. You have everything set up for your strawberries and whipped cream. So what I like to do is, while that's in the oven, I make sure my cooling rack is out, grab another sheet, you can grab two if you need to, of parchment paper. We're gonna need actually just one sheet of parchment paper. So grab that, get that ready, set it off to the side, and go and get your strawberries. And this is the part where I like to try to clean up everything and just have clear counters so you're all set to go with everything. So we have our strawberries. This particular recipe requires always clean your strawberries. I highly recommend organic strawberries. They taste so much better, and they're typically a lot smaller than the non-organic, and they don't have all the pesticides and everything on them, but you're going to want to wash them. It's super important to make sure they're patted dry. You don't want any extra moisture when we're laying it onto the whipped cream a little bit later on. And so just make sure these are all patted dry. I went ahead and did that in advance. So that's all done. And so you'll need about, I would say 10 to 12 small strawberries. If they're a little bit bigger, this one's pretty big, that can count as 2. And so just judge on the size. And we will go ahead and trim them up. I always hold the leaf, and a lot of people hold them first. I just hold the leaf and use that as a guide. And you want to slice them, I have a runner there. You want to slice them fairly thin, not too thick, just because it'll make rolling them up a little bit easier. So I just grab the edge where the leaves are, and I discard the leaves at the end, and I just slice them up. Oh, I love strawberries. I don't know about you guys. I absolutely love them. They smell so good. Just thinly slice this. Stack those up. Yeah, I actually have a hard time going back to non-organic strawberries. As a lot of you know, I grew up on a farm, and one thing we had a lot of were strawberries. And when you get a homegrown strawberry, you've tried a homegrown strawberry, oh my goodness, there's nothing like it in the world. So delicious. All right, just a couple more here, and you may not end up needing all of them, but that's okay if we have a few extra. There we go, and I just toss the top. And it's just a different way of cutting it, so I just thought I'd show you that piece. And you guys, just so you know, I told you it's in the oven for 14 minutes. Maybe your oven is a little bit different. You're looking for a super light golden color. And typically what I do is I take my finger, instead of using a toothpick. I don't typically do that with this recipe. It's going to be a thin cake. I just take my pointer finger and press in the center of the cake, and when you press, if it springs back to the touch where that indentation goes away, you know it's ready. And for my oven, it's exactly 14 minutes. You might have to go in an additional minute or 2. We'll test it out today, and so far my magic number has been 14. Okay, so our strawberries are all ready to go. So I'm just gonna set those off to the side. All right, you guys, so here's what it looks like. It's lightly golden, it's just beautiful. You can take your index finger and press in the center, and if it pops right back up, you know that it's done to perfection. Grab that table knife and just run it along the edge. I'm gonna actually use a holder to, and just be careful as you slide your knife. You don't tear the cake here. And we're just loosening it from the sides of the pan. There you go, and it will make flipping this just a little bit easier. All right. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is grab that cooling rack. We're gonna set it on top. We're gonna put back on our oven mitts, and we're just gonna flip it over here. There we go, and you'll hear it fall down onto the cooling rack. There we go. And just gently lift it up. Perfect, and set that off to the side. And then what you want to do is gently peel, grab the corner of the cake, the parchment paper, and just gently pull it towards you, just like this. And you have to go a little bit slow. You don't want to go too quick because you don't want to have any cake come with you. And you just pull off that piece of parchment paper. Off to the side. Now eventually this is going to be the top of our cake roll. So we're going to take that clean sheet of parchment paper, set it right on top, and we're going to flip it right back over. Perfect. And if the parchment paper comes off of it just a little bit, just adjust it like I did. Set this off to the side. And you just have to flip it like that. And then we're gonna turn it so the shorter edge is towards us, and we're gonna roll it up into a log. Just like this. And you wanna do all of this part super quickly, because if you let the cake cool, then what's gonna happen, it's gonna crack as you roll it. And we don't want our cake roll to crack at all. So it is nicely rolled up like a log. I can show you guys. And we're just gonna set this off to the side. And we're gonna let that cool down just a bit while we're working on the whipped cream. So go ahead and get your bowl and beater paddles out of the freezer. You're also gonna wanna grab your whipping cream out of your refrigerator as well. You're gonna need a cup and 1 1/4 cup of heavy whipping cream for this recipe. There we go. And we will put a beater attachment on here. And so 1 1/4 cups of whipping cream we'll just pour into the bottom. This trick of putting your bowl and beater into the freezer in advance is one of the best tips, because you'll see that this whipped cream comes together in no time at all. So go ahead and put all the whipping cream into the bottom. And then what we'll do is we have our powdered sugar. You're gonna need, the original recipe called for just a tablespoon or 2 of powdered sugar. My family, since I've made this so many times since then, wanted it just a little bit sweeter, so I increased it actually to 1/3 of a cup of powdered sugar. But it's up to you. Experiment with it. It still doesn't make it that sweet. That's what I love about this recipe. It's so light and airy and just barely sweet. But I did increase the powdered sugar to 1/3 of a cup. And then I want to share something with you, because I did change the original recipe that Jennifer had given me, because the recipe talked about stabilized whipped cream. And there's several ways you can stabilize whipped cream, and all that means is that once you whip the air into the whipped cream, if you set it in your refrigerator, typically it deflates. And if you've ever made cupcakes that have whipping cream in the frosting, this is a trick. You can use gelatin, and that's what her recipe used. And what I realized the more I made this, I just realized a lot of people are not going to have that on hand. And I thought I'd share a trick that I use, because most people have this ingredient on hand, or it's easier to find. And that is cornstarch. And you're going to be adding a tablespoon for every cup of whipping cream. We're using a 1 1/4 cup, so a tablespoon works just great for this recipe. You're going to add that in 1 1/4 cup of whipping cream. tablespoon of cornstarch in with your powdered sugar. There you go. The other method that Jennifer talked about, let me just wipe this up real quick. The other method that was in Jennifer's original recipe to me used unflavored gelatin, and you needed to melt the gelatin on the stove in a double boiler. You can also do it in the microwave. Use 1 1/4 teaspoons of unflavored gelatin. You sprinkle it over 5 teaspoons of water and you let it rest for 5 minutes. Then you go and melt it in some water, some simmering water, and let it cool. Then you add it to your whipping cream. You can certainly do that. I'll mention it into the recipe that I give you at the end, just in case you want to do that. But this trick of adding a tablespoon of cornstarch to your powdered sugar is a great one, and it does the exact same thing. If you put any more cornstarch in it, you'll be able to taste it. But a tablespoon with this amount of whipping cream, you won't taste it at all. You won't even notice the difference. My kids have taste tested everything. Another way you can stabilize whipping cream is to put the box instant vanilla pudding. Use a tablespoon of that in here. The reason I personally don't do that, typically I make my own pudding. I don't buy a lot of box things, but for those of you who do, use that if you don't have cornstarch on hand. But also know that if you use it, it will color this and tint the color to a yellow. And I love the white color of this dessert, so that was important to me in making this. I didn't want to change the color at all, but I just wanted to throw that tip out to you. So 3 ways: you can use unflavored gelatin, you can use cornstarch, or you can use instant vanilla pudding to stabilize your whipped cream. And it's a fun tip for when you're frosting cupcakes that have a delicious whipped cream frosting, to get them to hold and stay high. It's a great little tip for that. So let's keep going. And we're going to start to whip this up. I'll put it on low. And just let it mix together a little bit, then you can turn it up high. And all it's doing is whipping air into it, just like our meringue pretty much. And as you see it begin to thicken, that's when you're going to want to start to add the powdered sugar. You just have to watch it. It's going to look super liquidy. And as it thickens up, you'll be able to easily tell that it's getting thicker, because you'll start to see the crack marks of the beater in the mixture. And because I don't want powdered sugar flying up at me, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my mixer and sprinkle in a little bit of that powdered sugar. And maybe it's a tablespoon or so, 2 tablespoons. Turn it back on. And I'll just do the same thing. Sprinkle it in all around. I did about in 2 cakes, so about half the first time and use the second half. And when it's finished whipping it up, and you'll see that it's getting super thick. It looks super yummy. And kids love this part. You guys know that they're whipped cream. It's so simple to make at home. And again, we're looking for it to be a stiffened cream, and there we have our stiffening fish. It looks super yummy. You can even take a little taste. See if you like the sweetness of it. Super yummy. And again, you'll be surprised that it's really not sweet at all. Just barely sweet. So now, set that bowl off to the side. Grab a spatula. and have those strawberries nearby that we cut up. There we go. And we'll just grab our cake roll. And now all we're gonna do is we're gonna gently unroll it. It's so funny because years ago you had to use powdered sugar because we didn't use parchment paper a lot. And I have such a funny story. My daughter was little and I was making a chocolate Swiss roll, and she came in, she was a toddler at the time, barely the height of our counters, and didn't know what the towel was on top of the counter, and she needed it to clean up something, and she pulled it off the counter and was covered in head to toe powdered sugar. I'll share a picture of her just so you can see it. And I realized in that moment that I could have gotten mad because there was such a mess, and it would have been easier for me to be in the kitchen by myself. But it was truly this epiphany moment because she looked up with her big green eyes at me, and I knew she was just trying to help. And I thought, gosh, I really want my kids in the kitchen with me from here on out in my life. And it was such a great lesson for me. So I hope all you mamas out there who have young kids, bring them in the kitchen with you and have fun with them. We laugh to this day about that picture because I had the wherewithal to go run, grab my camera, come back, take a picture of her covered in head to toe. And this was way before, we had iPhones. And so the picture I'll show you, you'll get a kick out of that. And so I think of that every time I make these cake rolls. So what you're gonna do, the cake roll is cooled, we unrolled it, and we are just gonna spread out this whipped cream on here. Now, a trick is to try to keep it about an inch from all edges. And all that's gonna do is help you when you go to roll it up so it's not oozing out everywhere. And we're just trying to scrape every last little bit of whipped cream, the good stuff, out onto here. Of it. Okay. And then just use your spatula and spread it, and like I said, try to keep it about an inch away from the edge, and that will help in preventing it from oozing out everywhere. And you just want an even layer of the whipped cream all the way across. Oh my gosh, this already looks just so good. I was telling my son earlier that I was making this today for a share class, and he definitely agreed that it's a great recipe to share and use because you guys will love it just like our family does. Okay, so we have our strawberries all set to go, and just a reminder that if they are super juicy, just pat them off with a paper towel, and we're just going to spread out our strawberries everywhere in an even layer. So you guys can see that, and like I said, you may use all of them, you may not. Oh, this is heavenly. I can't wait for you guys to try it and taste it and see for yourself how delicious this is. There we go, and you're just spreading it out. And I try to pack, as tightly as I can to get as many strawberries on here, because who doesn't love a strawberry? And as you guys, get good at making these cake rolls, then you can go to town experimenting as much as you want with different flavors and combinations, and it can be a lot of fun. And any of the little ones, you don't have to use those. Use the bigger ones, or the bigger slices, I should say. There we have it. And okay, so I'm just gonna wipe my hands up real quick. All right. And then what I want you to do is go ahead and grab some plastic wrap. You guys know I like my big rolls, so I'm just gonna set that off to the side and have that ready to go. And we're gonna be wrapping that up. So turn the short edge to you again, and then just roll it back up into a log. There you go. And I tend to work on the outside and try to pull my hands into the center and just gently roll it. And you'll see that that whipped cream will start to spread to the outside of it as well as to the edge. And do not worry if it starts to ooze out in the front. That is perfectly fine. Don't waste any of it. Leave it right there. Go ahead and grab a sheet of plastic wrap. What I do is I just lay it on the top, and then this part will help you with getting your roll wrapped up super tightly. And so I didn't quite roll it to the end, so what I do is I spread my plastic wrap over the top, and then I grab it so your fingers aren't getting all covered in the whipping cream. And then you can use your hand to pat it back inside, just like that. And then you can gently reach under it and wrap the rest of it up. And you'll be able to tell the instant that you touch this cake that just the texture, you'll be able to feel how light and airy it is. And just make sure that, there you go. And then, let me just show you. I'm just gonna tighten up. Make sure that plastic wrap is on the ends. And then I can show you, look how beautiful this is. Now what I want you to do, and you can see the end of it there too. Now what you can do is I want you to put this in the fridge because during this time the whipped cream has gotten a little soft. So put it in the fridge and we're gonna let it set. Okay, so now it's in the fridge. We're gonna let that whipped cream set back up and we're gonna just chill the cake roll. I usually leave it in there for about a half an hour, maybe an hour. You can leave it in as long as you want. Make this in the morning and then in the evening pull it out. That works great too. I'll typically do that. This is a recipe I make in advance a lot. It's a great one to serve guests. They're gonna think you're super fancy. By making this for them, they're gonna fall in love with it too. So we are back and our cake roll has been in the refrigerator. Told you we put it in just to let everything set up and chill really nice. So we're just going to remove the plastic wrap, and what I like to do is pick it up with the plastic wrap on, and then that side where it was oozing out just a little bit, go ahead and face that down, and then the plastic comes right off. And you can put it on I have a little rectangular platter here. And my family is so excited, they cannot wait until I cut into. And then grab a serrated edge knife. That makes it a little bit easier to cut. I always try to cut off just the very end of it. And it'll just give you a little bit cleaner of a cut. And I like to cut it about, I would say just an inch wide. And let me just show you. Make sure it's cut all the way through before I lift it up here. Put it onto a plate that has some sliced strawberries, and I will show you just how beautiful this is. You can see all the strawberries in the middle and the whipped cream. absolutely beautiful. And so let me grab a fork here. And of course I have to take a bite of it. Like I said, it's a perfect dessert for company, or, you know, when the weather is nice outside. This dessert literally melts in your mouth. You're gonna fall in love with it. I really hope you guys try it. And I just have to give Jennifer a huge shout out for sharing this recipe for me, for trusting me to tweak it so it would work for her, and thrilled that she reached out. And remember, you can always reach out too. You can find us at Sharing Life, Love, and Food. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and we just love to help people out. And so I hope you'll reach out with anything you're struggling with, and I hope you give this recipe a try, and I know it's gonna become a favorite, just like it is for my family. They are chomping at the bit to try this, and you're just gonna love it. So we will see you guys all next time. Thanks so much.